us when we do our field trip. He's the oldest youth, not a youth anymore. He's an adult now, but a great model for us, for our kids. And it's a pleasure to have you here again. Thank you.
The oldest youth, damn. I like it though. Okay, it's gonna stay here, I think. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh boy. Today we're gonna talk about. We were just gonna talk about forgiveness, but it's very hard to like take one big subject and say this is what we're gonna talk about today. So we're gonna approach it from a few different angles. Last time I was here, I talked about charity, and I went home thinking, wow, I didn't talk about Jesus once. And I was like, that's not good. And also responsibility, because I realized putting this together, we're going to touch upon sort of responsibility and accountability quite a lot today. So I would like to start the same way I kind of began a lecture similar to this a little while ago, talking about the law of cause and effect, because forgiveness is all about human interaction, or ideally forgiveness is a human interaction. And the reason why things happen, the reason why problems happen, is because we do things, and then those things lead to consequences down the road. That's what Spiritism calls the law of cause and effect. It's sort of way more overarching force in our lives than we think about, than we expect, especially here where we are on Earth in this time of our spiritual evolution. And part of the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because we live in a world that's very, I don't want to say it's not crazy. It's kind of crazy sometimes, but not all the time. And we may question, why does this happen? Why does that happen? Why is it that these things happen in this part of the world? And why do these kind of people seem to always get into trouble or always befall trouble? And part of the way God works doesn't always make the most sense, right? Not to us, at least, all the time. On Tuesdays, back in Divine Light, we have sort of our English meeting, our English group, and it's mostly for folks who are either new to the doctrine or just want to know more about themselves. The group is called the Self-Knowledge sort of hour we talk about. And one of the things that gets talked about most there is, like I said, explaining and figuring out and realizing why things happen the way they happen, why situations happen to our lives the way they do. And this particular question in the Spirit's book that I think is, that I think is really good, is question 740. This is the chapter on the law of destruction, right? This is sort of very pertinent to what's happening or has always happened, but what we see more of now. So may not such calamities also constitute for man a moral trial? By calamities, Allan Kardec is asking all the terrible things, big things like war, for example, but also smaller terrible things, like a terrible accident that befalls a person or their family or their house, compelling them to struggle with the hardest necessities of his lot. And the spirits say they are always trials. All these bad things are always trials. And trials are like things we go through to understand better or come out better on the other side. They furnish him with the opportunity of exercising his intelligence and proving his patience and his resignation to the will of God, and displaying his sentiments of abnegation, disinterestedness, and love for his neighbor. if he be not under the domination of selfishness. All of this to say, I think it's very important to remember forgiveness is not something that just kind of like happens. Ideally, it's an interaction, and the reason why we need to forgive is because there are problems. If there were no differences between people, there'd be no reason for people to grow. There'd be no reason for people to find a way to get better. And I like to think that problems start when your humanity and the humanity of someone else kind of clash their limits, right? We get mad and sometimes we get frustrated with people because the things they're doing sort of infringe on our expectations of what we wish they would do. And that's part of being human. That's part of being here. And if charity is a force we can use to sort of outwardly accept these people, forgiveness is a force we can use to rid ourselves of any emotional baggage we carry because of these interactions. Yesterday at work, oh boy, here we go. Yesterday at work we had a very strange, tense situation. It didn't evolve into an altercation, which I'm really happy about, but I work at a gallery. Part of what we do between art shows is we're preparing. So there's like tables laid out on the floor with art on them, and we're deciding what goes where, and we're deciding what is going to be put in a frame, what isn't. We're waiting for okays from different people. And every once in a while, a stray person comes in to ask a question or to like wander in and figure out, well, what's this place? What's this building? I've never seen this place before. Well, that's fine. That's always fine. In the rarest of occasions, there will be someone who, in a big city like Newark, New Jersey, maybe wanders around, maybe isn't very well in the head, as you could say, and comes in, sort of doesn't listen to instructions, sort of is disruptive, wants to cause trouble, wants to go into rooms where they're not allowed, where they're not supposed to. Imagine in your off days, imagine you guys are just, you know, Janine or Naja are just here doing some computer work, doing some preparation, preparing for the next class. Someone comes in wanting to see what's in the rooms, wanting to go in every room, wanting to, you know, maybe take something. And it's just you, and you don't really know what to do. It's kind of scary. But when these things get resolved, it comes down to that situation again, right? This is not what you want a person to do, but that's what a person did. You can't help but to have to accept that this person's humanity led them to infringe on your peace, to like give you a hard time. And what do? You kind of have to let it go. You kind of have to forgive. Because if you don't, you're going to carry that tense feeling for the rest of the day. And I did. And it wasn't good. And it affects you and your productivity. It's one of those things that keeps you from doing your job. And one of the reasons I think we don't really like to forgive when it comes to daily problems or situations like this. Because we think of forgiveness as this get out of jail free card, right? Someone, I'm trying to like relate back to what happened to me that I didn't like in like 8th grade. Okay, so like someone takes a drawing you've been making, you know, and they're like, what's this? It's dumb. I'm going to take it. Ha ha ha. Because that's how it is, right? Because no one makes more fun of Brazilian kids than other Brazilian kids. That's my experience, at least. And it's just kind of just like that. And it's like, and it's a bummer, and you're mad at people, and you don't really want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, you know, maybe they're not doing too well, or maybe they just haven't learned to be nice yet, though they should. Like 13 it's knocking there on being too old to not know how to be nice. But it's one of those things. You don't want to give people the chance to do better again because you think it's too easy to just be like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's okay, like whatever, right? They're maybe not having a good day. Maybe they don't know how to socialize very well. And it's one of those things where we think it's this easy way out, but forgiveness is actually the high road. Because even though it may seem like we're letting someone off the hook, the reason we don't want to do it is because it takes so much emotional work. It's one of those things where it may seem easy as a physical action, but it's very hard on you to think about something wrong that was done to you and then think, wow, I'm just going to let this go? I'm just going to let it slide like that? They haven't learned their lesson. Like, what's the good in this? What good do I do not letting them, you know? It's unfair. It feels unfair. A situation that happened to me years ago is very similar to this. And it was like, that's why yesterday was kind of hard with the altercation with the guy who just showed up at my job and wanted to like enter rooms that he wasn't supposed to. Because years prior, on my way to the gallery, I was like, kind of robbed. No, I was robbed. It wasn't kind of. They took my phone. And it sucked. Oh my God, it sucked. And then like your dad tells you, like, why did you have your phone out? You know, it's like, well, why didn't I have my phone out? I was like checking a text message. Like, what else do you do when you're like 2 minutes from work and then something you're not expecting happens? Again, someone's humanity got in the way of yours. That day, they decided they wanted to take someone's phone, and you just happened to be the person with the phone out right there. And it was a heck of a day. And again, these kinds of things, they infringe on your day, right? Obrigado. Is my voice rough? Hopefully not anymore. And it's those situations where if you don't forgive or at least do something to help along that emotional work that you have to do, you're going to carry that trauma, you know, for the rest of the day and the week and the month, maybe the year, right? It was like August when this happened. I could have like had a terrible semester in school the next year. What ended up happening was I went to the police station and I reported the crime that was happened. And they sort of, you know, kept me in check. I went in and gave a deposition. They like sit you down inside their like little kitchen because it's the place in their office that's like they can lock a door and an officer can sit with you and like ask all these questions. And it was fine. And so like 11:30 that night, they call me and they say, so we caught someone who fits the description. They were caught doing the same thing to like at least several other people, and we found a phone in their possession, and it fits the description of your phone. I'm like, okay, great. So we go, and I am able to retrieve my phone because if I didn't retrieve it that day, it would have gone into like evidence, and I would have had to go and petition to get it back or whatever. And then they sat me down again in that same little kitchen room, and they lined up some photos of possible suspects of the crime committed. So it was like a lineup. It was like a little picture, like little, like terrible little, like if you put a Microsoft, like if you copy photos onto Microsoft Word, make them black and white, and print them. They're not good. That's what was given to me. Very similar looking young men. And I confess, I was wearing shades. It was crazy. I wasn't looking at the face of the guy who like robbed my phone. I thought in that moment when they were asking me, so which one of these guys looks like the one who did it? Because they can't be biased and tip you off. And I told him, I don't feel comfortable pointing at any one of these because I don't remember exactly who did it. And pointing at someone in that moment could have meant giving someone else an unfair charge that, they didn't have to live with for that day. Even though a crime was committed against me, I followed through, got my justice, aka got my phone back. It was like ruined, by the way. So we had to get it refurbished. But I got what I wanted, right? So since I got what I wanted, there was no reason to then be like, yeah, let him get what he deserves now. Already had been caught, already got my phone back, already had a crazy, terrible day. Let's move on from this. So I didn't point anyone out in that lineup because it didn't feel right. And that was a lot of emotional work. It's one of those high road situations. So in that moment, forgiveness, I guess my forgiveness to this guy who robbed my phone, took a whole day's worth of missing work and all this crazy stuff. And sometimes it's for the better. Sometimes it teaches you. Because what if at the end of the day I had made a mistake, right? Yeah. So that was that. And it's one of those situations. So forgiving can be one of those situations that's very high and very difficult to process. And in Spiritism, we are always, constantly being reminded to forgive others, to think about what others might have been going through when they were doing bad to you. And it's not that it's rare. I just don't see speakers talk very often about turning the mirror back to us and think, what can we do to ask for forgiveness for the bad we've done, or to forgive ourselves for things we're not happy that we've done? It's not always, it just is more common, more regular for us to hear advice on how to forgive people who do you wrong. It's not always easy to hear advice on how to ask for forgiveness when you've done wrong. And it's kind of where we get into the responsibility, accountability part of the whole thing. One of my favorite, or at least the author I kind of stick around the most, just because it's easy to read, Juno DeAngelis, with the little Happy Life book Patrick read. These are excerpts from that book, by the way. And it's something that I've noticed in the past few weeks, specifically picking out some of these readings, like Lesson 82 and 85. Look at what she's asking of us. Before you assume any responsibility, think it through to avoid unpleasant situations. Whatever the magnitude of your responsibilities, always fulfill them. Later on she says, keep your activities well organized. A disciplined person is a treasure. Being orderly and aware of the fact that life is an endless activity means a step forward on the road of evolution. This sounds a lot like, I don't know, like a pep talk almost, to be more productive in the company almost, right? Except the company is like life on earth and God's the CEO. And Juno DeAngelis is our stern but understanding pep talker. And I like this a lot because responsibility and holding yourself accountable, being aware of the things you're doing, is only helpful, is never not good, is only going to, I don't know, help us to understand when the things we do aren't good or when the things we do could be done better. This is, again, work. It just happens because when you get in, like when you go to school for like 12 years and then you start working, it's not always easy. And this week, oh my God, these last few weeks, they haven't. So I've got proof of my inconsistencies. for you all to see. So this is a text message from my boss. And here he says, "In the future, if you won't be able to get to something on the schedule I asked for, please let me know in advance." Is this not the exact opposite of what Joanna DeAngelis is asking right here? Whatever the magnitude of your responsibilities, always fulfill them. Should something keep you from showing up or attending, communicate it ahead of time. Well, I didn't, apparently. So it's one of those things where if it wasn't, not that I don't think I'd be accountable if it wasn't for Jonah DeAngelis kind of like knocking on the door reminding me, at least it's a great reminder, right? To read and to have someone official be like, hey, being accountable for your actions is only ever going to help you. And this is one of those things where you make a mistake, you can't just kind of move on. Because these kinds of things, they can affect you later on. Too much of this, and I don't get text messages anymore. I get fired, right? I thought it'd be funny. I did a Twitter poll, but no one answered. So I went on Twitter. My sister didn't vote. She's not here, so I can't really call her out. But this is kind of like sort of my way of dealing with the fact that I didn't really do my job the best way I could have done it. And you just sort of, you kick it. You don't really hold on to that too long, because if you begin to internalize this idea that, oh man, I'm having a bad streak. Oh man, I'm having a bad week. Oh no, what's going to happen next time I have to go to work? Am I going to be late again? Am I going to wake up on time? It sounds crazy, but it's real. It like gets you. Any person who's like prone to anxiety or ADHD or like a depressive episode, for example, it's very easy to get caught up in your head about your actions and about your wrongdoings, especially if people call you out on it. So when they call you out on it, it's good because they're reminding you to be accountable for your actions. But what's not good is to sort of let this paranoia fester. I brought this girl from Inside Out. Did you guys watch the movie? I thought it was great. This girl from Inside Out is like a minor character. And she's like cool and aloof and like you think everything's fine, and the main character, of course, is going through issues. And in the little credits, we come to find out that behind her super cool bangs and neon green eyeshadow, the emotion that overruns her brain and leads the operation is fear. So behind this facade of everything is fine, or I could really not care less, fear is in the helm. And this is kind of, maybe I guess I like ran over myself a little bit here. But this is a way to think about, begin to think about now, why people do the things they do. Right? It's very easy, like I said before, to be mad at people and to not want to forgive them for the things they do, to not want to understand the things they do because we think it's unfair. And even though this is like an animation, a cartoon, so to say, this is so much more common than it might seem now where you are, right? Not everyone has it together. Everyone who has made you mad about something or has stepped on your toes about something either has had a bad day the day before or is having a bad day now. So it's important to realize even the people who are in charge, even the people who tell you how to do things, who are telling you to be responsible about your actions, they haven't mastered it yet either. Because that's the thing about being on Earth right now, is that, I don't know, there's probably like a handful of really like top-notch spirits who like don't do wrong. And the rest are people like us who like get text messages from their bosses telling them that if they're not going to do the work, let them know ahead of time, and a slew of other things. It's good to remember that everyone else is also just as human as you, so that we don't run into that problem of my humanity is bumping up against another person's, and I don't get why. Well, it's because they're human too. And it's because in that day, in that moment, they're also mistake prone, just like you are. No, not yet. One of the ways this manifests, I think, prominently in the day-to-day now is bullying. Dun, dun, dun. The dreaded word. I bring it up not to be like, oh, you know, there's kids, let's talk about bullying. I bring it up because the idea of one central person being pestered by a group of people who seem to have it better or think or project that they have it better is very common. So common, in fact, it doesn't just happen at the beginning when you're in school and it's a sort of socially controlled environment by your teachers. It happens when you're at work. Ask your moms if they're house cleaners. The kind of like things they experience with their workmates, or things they experience with unkind bosses, or bosses who just seem to have like a need to point out everything that's wrong and like not bat an eyelash at everything that's right. That's kind of bullying, a little bit. If we're gonna make it literal, bringing a person down and not positioning yourself in the same level as that person, that's kind of what it is. And to sort of help us understand that, many a time in those situations, it's not always us that's the victim, right? That's the reason why we're kind of trying to be all over the place with the perspective on forgiveness, because it's not always us right there in the center being bullied. I know I've been in the center, but I understand that's also many times I've been on the outside, right? On the outside, looking at it without doing anything, or directly surrounding the victim, quote unquote, and letting them have a bad day. So, like, law of cause and effect, right? We've covered that. No one is inherently just a victim. Everyone's kind of, with everything that happens in their life, either doing something to make up for a mistake they made, or they're put in situations that they don't quite understand to make up for something that they were a part of in the past. So a person who gets pestered and gets bothered and gets, I don't know, they never did this when I was in school, but like spitballs. I don't think that's a thing anymore. I don't know. But balled up paper is, that I know it is. Or like, I don't know, a mean chain of text messages. That happens to people. And maybe it happens to them because earlier, much earlier, they were part of some kind of group perpetration to, you know, get this one person. None of that really matters, because when we are trying to help a person who's a victim of bullying, we're not really going to sit there and think, well, maybe in a past existence, they were the bully, so this is what they're going through now. At the same time, we can't just like expect things to figure themselves out, or to always think it's going to be that way. This one time, Jesus was approached by some people of the law, the Pharisees. He was sitting there, he was chilling. And they came and they were like, hey Jesus, hey teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commands us to stone such women to death. Now what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have basis for accusing him. So Jesus says, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Now go and leave your life of sin. It's a very meta example to compare directly to bullying. So let's all realize that this is an extreme example, right? But what this does here is it shines a very good light on sort of socially sanctioned or socially acceptable ways bad things happen to people, or other people bully or pester or inconvenience people's lives. And because it's like law, we accept it, or it's okay. And we don't really want to think about holding people accountable, or we don't really want to think about our responsibility in a situation like this if we're the people who want to throw the stones, because it's just okay. And if there's one thing Spiritism always wants from us, is to be more aware of the things we do, be more aware of the things we think, and to, hold ourselves accountable. Maybe not to say, oh, I didn't do anything when this bad situation happened. I'm going to now be guilty forever. I'm going to never allow myself happiness again. But to understand that if you are complicit in a situation like this, in the accusation of someone innocent, or in just not making someone's day better when you could have, to understand that if you did something wrong, you ought to do something to make it right. This came about once in my life, and this is sort of right out of high school, my first semester in college, or second. There was this girl, Laura, and there was this program we did at nights, on Monday nights, called Vent, a very empowering night of talking, where we sort of gathered. It was like a meeting hosted by the campus's women's center for people of like an LGBT minority or this other kind of minority to get together and talk about just how their day went and what they're not really happy about. It was a safe space, right? In that safe space, I once asked this girl, Laura, who had a cleft palate scar, very directly, so what happened to your lip? Right? And she sort of tensed up. I didn't think much of it. She answered, this is a cleft palate scar. I was born with a cleft palate, and I didn't think much of it. Come later to receive an email from our talk group coordinator saying, Laura revealed to me that she didn't really feel comfortable at all with your question, and that she felt that in that safe space, her privacy should have been honored a little more. Her body shouldn't have been pointed at and questioned. And I got it. It was like, oh, damn. This is one of those things that I did wrong. And thankfully, had a chance to repair almost right away, right? Because in the college system, if you go, it's convenient because everyone's email, if you look up the first letter of their name and their last name is there. So I was like, aha, there she is. And then we wrote it out. Later on we met and we talked it out. And it was one of those things that thankfully got resolved. And it was like, lesson learned. Let's not point out things about people's bodies like that again, ever. Because their comfort level, their vulnerability aren't worth my curiosity is not worth, their privacy being invaded like that. But there are certain things that we don't realize we're doing. There are certain situations that are a little unrepairable, a little unredeemable. And there are ways to redeem. Nothing is unredeemable, so don't worry. But the next thing I'm going to talk to you guys about, situations like this. So this is my friend Jason. He's no longer with us. It's not going to be emotional, don't worry. It's serious, but I'm not going to cry right here. Jason graduated with us in May of last year, and not a month after graduation, we hear word that Jason had killed himself. Right? And this was oh my God. So hyper awareness, right? Our first camping trip, right? That Saturday we were leaving, that's when I got the news. So we were going home and I was like, oh my God. We stopped at Dunkin' Donuts. I got a Sprite because I couldn't handle it anymore. And we kind of just went. And this is one of those classic cases you always hear about. Oh, damn. No one knew that there was something wrong, or no one knew that there could have been anything wrong. And it's just we were all kind of in that same place in our last semester of college, of being way too busy with everything and not really wanting to burden anyone with our problems. So we kind of let things slide. But I kind of took it a little bit harder because being a spiritist and being knowing about what happens to people who commit suicide, it's oh damn, if sorry, feedback, see? I was oh crap, it was bad, right? I felt bad because in a situation like this, if anyone could have stepped in to help, having known anything, it should have been me in a situation like this. Having known this person for several years, having been in class with them, the comfort level was there to approach and to speak, but it never got to that place. And never am going to have that chance again, right? Maybe in a different lifetime, but not right now. And this is not something we should carry on forever, right? This is a suicide that happened to someone else. And even though our friend in this directly impacts us, you can't take on the fault of something big. That's something that can happen to young people, because I did some research. People, especially young people, can internalize bad things that happen to other people and sort of carry guilt for longer without proper processing. And this is one of those perfect situations where without proper processing, proper bereavement, having a parent to talk to, having a friend to vent with, you can carry something heavy like this and let it affect your whole life. And when it comes to forgiving yourself for something you didn't do, there's never a time limit. It can get harder the longer you leave it alone, but there's never a time limit. And that's why I'm letting you guys know this. Because it might come a time when you find yourself in a situation where you think, damn, I could have done more. Or a situation where you no longer have a chance to handle it with this person. Or a situation where you ask for forgiveness and someone just straight up says no. They think it's too easy to forgive you. It's like giving you a get out of jail free card. That doesn't mean you now carry this guilt and think, oh wow, I'm never going to make amends, I'm never going to get over this. Forgiveness can be paid out. It doesn't have to, it should ideally be to the person you have a problem with. But if that doesn't work, there is no shortage of ways to fix things. There's no shortage of way to fix problems. God is not going to, keep that little tally mark unchecked until you solve a problem with this individual. Because if this individual doesn't want to solve the problem with you, you're going to still do it. You're just not going to solve it with them. I guess I don't think we're going to end on the happiest note, unfortunately, but I think the next little story I want to tell is really good about this whole thing. I have a Tumblr. I don't know if you guys do. But Tumblr is really good because, well, it's not really good. It's a social media like everything else. It takes up your time. But some people there, because it's sort of like a blogging-esque situation, they have an easier time sharing their art, their stories. And there was this one sort of comic strip that an artist shared that really got to me. So this artist, doing the calculations, is now a 30-year-old woman. She was recounting back, thinking back about her childhood, and she said it all began when she, on a whim one day, decided to go on Facebook and search and see how her middle school bully was doing. And as it turned out, her middle school bully was doing just fine. And she recounts the experiences of when they used to be friends and the kinds of things that started the attrition and why they didn't want to be friends anymore. And in the end of the comic, in the little conclusion, which I thought was really powerful, is that she realized it was the first time she had considered not everyone had a deeply unhappy childhood. Not everyone spent 20 years trying to erase the first 10. Not everyone was her. This is what we're trying to prevent here, right? This is what we're trying to prevent with a talk on lecture like this, such as this, with overarching topics like bullying and like people doing wrong by you. We talked about the consequences of our actions earlier. We don't realize this, but the consequences of our actions don't just not happen because they're not happening to us. The things we say, the things we do, things we don't say and do can carry on with other people for 20 years. Which is not to say it's our fault if we didn't know better, or it's our fault forever. The girl's bully could have had life experiences and done things to repair this about herself, and probably has moved on emotionally, which is why she was having a good time. But the person who this happened to carried it, and if you do the math, when she was 10, having spent 20 years processing these bad experiences in her childhood, like what kind of life is that? When you have bad things that happen to you at one point and they carry over and they fester for so long that you don't want to remember these people, you don't want to remember this time in your life because it was so painful. Forgiveness is quite literally like a wrench. If you have your pickup truck and it's too full and stuck, forgiveness is that wrench or that hammer you can use to pop open the trunk and let all that dirt off, right? You still have the receipts. Forgiving doesn't mean you shred the receipts or don't have them or that the hurt isn't there. Forgiveness is how you let yourself move on, how you allow yourself to move on from a mistake someone else made towards you, is how you move on from a mistake you've made towards someone else, or how you move on from a mistake that you made to yourself. I'm going to stay on top of my job this week so that I don't repeat my mistakes. And I'm not going to, try not to sleep too late. But we sort of get the overarching point. It's not about just sort of letting people go, get by with the wrong they've done, or letting ourselves get by with the wrong we've done and not think about it. It's about thinking about it, understanding it for what it is, and doing the responsible thing at the end of the day. And carrying on hurt and pain for years and years and years is actually not responsible, because it keeps you from doing other better things with your time, with yourself, with your emotions. It hinders you. So even though it's a lot of emotional work, as we've covered, to forgive and to move on, it's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile investment to forgive, because you're going to prevent, in the long run, things slowing you down. But yeah, I think that's that. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you. After the prayer, we ask you guys to stay here. I have one thing to say. Thank you, João. It was awesome. I hope we can find a place in our heart to forgive those who have hurt us and to forgive ourselves, because we are not perfect. Let's close our eyes and thank God, the Creator, for this whole universe and everything in it in such a harmony that we